There we go. All right, so hello YouTube and welcome to everybody, all the students who are here to our presentation on grad school in the mathematical sciences. I'm Dr. Shu, and so let's get right to it. So the first point I want to make is that you can do it, and I know you can do it because there are so many people who have done it. This is, let's see, this is within maybe the last 5 to 10 years. Yeah. So within the last 5 to 10 years, all these folks have graduated from San Jose State with some kind of degree, some undergraduate, some graduate degrees. Some people were sort of partway through their master's program and then started up a PhD. All these folks are off getting PhDs, and so many of you here can already attest. You can also do. It's clear that you guys can do master's degrees because a lot of you are actually already in the master's program and succeeding. So the first thing I want to mention is that if you look at, especially if you look at all these sort of fancy schmancy places, and there's some fancy schmancy places on this list. Oh yeah, somebody's mentioning biostatistics. So actually, this is one of our illustrious alums who is actually just now finishing up her PhD in biostatistics at University of Michigan. Which I think is one of the top 2 programs in the country. So anyway, the point is that you can do it, and these folks. I mean, I know a lot of you, and y'all are just as good as these folks. So you can do it. It can be done. So another data point that I want to make in terms of you can do it is you might be wondering well, what happens after people get doctorate degrees? What happens to them? So here are some sort of recent San Jose State math alums who then finished their PhD, got PhDs, and went somewhere else afterwards. So Irvin Balderrama, I think, is now at Fresno State. Marian Faraz worked at a bunch of different places, actually around the Bay Area. It's quite successful, and I think currently a data science manager at Zymer. She was successful enough that the last time I saw her, I know Marian from way back, and the last time I saw her, she was going to cash out what she was doing at the time. And she was like, I'm just going to go to Burning Man and then chill out for a year. So, you know that when you can take the year off, that's when you have some money. So, she did all right for herself. She's done all right for herself. You may know Dr. Fryer. Dr. Fryer is a San Jose State alum. He got his PhD in math at Urbana-Champaign and held a postdoc at Pomona College before coming here and becoming an assistant professor. Kate Isaacs. Graduate with math, double major math and CS. I got a PhD from UC Davis and is now an assistant professor. Oh, question? I thought I heard a question. Oh, yeah. So if you have a question, go ahead and speak up, or you can just type it into the chat if you don't feel. But we are being recorded. But if you don't feel like being recorded, go ahead just go ahead and type it in the chat. Oh, what is CNC machine? So I don't actually know. So yeah, we'll get to the last one. Right. So let's see. David Zimmerman is now an engineer at Raytheon, and I think so. Charlie Peterson. I have to ask. So Charlie Peterson was actually is sort of. Well, I should say we have the 2 of us had together about 90% of a paper, and we just somehow haven't gotten one to finish the other 10% because I'm an incurable procrastinator is why. But yeah, he got a math degree from Santa Cruz. And is now working as basically a computer aided machinist at NorCal Engineering. So yeah, I think basically he's a programmer now. I think he explained it to me a little. I think he's basically a programmer now. Yeah. So are these alum? I think these all happen to be bachelor's alums. Is that right? I think that's true. It happens that these are all bachelor's alums. Somebody's asking are these bachelor's or master's alums? Kelly, I believe, has a master's degree in statistics, or at least partway. And I think so. One of the things, if you want to get a PhD and you're sort of here already in a master's degree, one of the things that I always advise people is that you should just go get the PhD. Just go ahead and go up to the next level as soon as you can, because life is short, and seize the day and all that. Anyway, yeah, but I believe these all happen to be. Yeah, it just so happens that this list happens to be bachelor's alums but a lot of people, let's see, in this other list, Olga finished her, did her master's with me. I think Sambo did, I know, some postgraduate work. Let's see, Nick, these guys were master's students before. Alina has a master's degree from a long time ago, and then she went out to industry for like 10, 15 years, and then came back. Let's see, who else has it? Yeah, Mark has a master's degree. Joseph as well. So yeah, I mean, I think, and both Nita and Nicole have master's degrees, right? Because I know them from teaching. So that's interesting. So it just I think it's maybe just because this older list tends to have a sort of just happen to have some sort of older alums, and it sort of before, I think we were having a lot of bachelor's alums go out and get PhDs, and now I guess maybe the trend is sort of moving the other way. We're having more master's students go out and get PhDs. So that's an excellent question. I've seen success in both approaches, like people who get bachelor's degree and then right away go and try to get a PhD, or people who get master's degrees and then get PhDs. So George, did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Perhaps I over answered it, as I tend to do. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, so not only can people finish and go on to lead successful and interesting lives. All right, so I should say, because maybe just because the story is more complicated, if you're going to go get a PhD, it is definitely true that our master's program has had like great success recently in terms of placing employment, people getting teaching positions, and for people getting tech jobs. And so we have people, we have all kinds of folks. Yes, here are the two of the ways, and because I'm actually happen to be the TA supervisor, the two ways that I interact with sort of master's employment most often are, one, through writing people letters of recommendations for teaching jobs at local community colleges, and we have lots of excellent people out there. And the second thing is for tech companies. The weird thing for tech companies, with every like 3 or 4 months now, I get a letter from the Department of Defense asking if some particular, not all the same person, but if some particular person that I know from being a TA supervisor is like a reliable person who will not threaten the security of the United States. And I say, yes, this person is reliable. But okay. So yeah, so I know there are lots of people getting jobs jobs at tech companies who can't tell me what they're doing, I guess now. But yeah, there's lots of so if you get a master's degree here, then it really makes you pretty marketable. And whether you tend to go into teaching, which is sort of what the pure master's tends to be pointed towards, or if you go into industry, which is what the applied master's tends to point you towards, including the data science masters. And data science hasn't been around long enough. I think that the program hasn't been around. It's only like a couple years old, so it hasn't really been around long enough so that I can tell you sort of who is gone from there to do such awesome, successful things. But I'm sure within it, probably by the end of this year, we'll see people graduating with degrees in data science and going off and doing awesome things. So yeah, rest assured that if you're already here in the San Jose State Master's program, or if you're interested in the San Jose State Master's in a San Jose State Master's program, they're excellent programs to be in. All right, so yeah, right. So are there any questions about sort of you can do it? I hope I've convinced everybody you can do it. Yay! So questions about the you can do it part of our presentation today. Okay. So the next thing, as you can see from our little thing on the side here, the next question is, this is especially true for PhDs. It's maybe a little less so for master's degrees, but there's some truth to it. So there's a hard part and an easy part. And I guess I guess one of the distinctions between the PhD and the master's degree is that for the PhD, the hard part is harder. And oddly enough, the easy part is actually easier for PhDs. And we'll get to that. So relative to getting a doctoral degree, the hard part of getting a PhD is the question you have to ask yourself, which is, why do I want to get a PhD? Because if you're going to get a PhD, you're going to be spending the next 5 to 7 years of your life doing that. That's like, that's just an average amount of time it takes to finish a PhD in the United States. And so if you're going to spend 5 to 7 years of your life doing something, it's a good idea to know why. I mean, I guess I got to say, I come from a pretty comfortable background, and so right, because I can. So that's more or less was my reasoning in going to get a PhD. Is like, well, I'm going to do this because I don't know, it seems easier than working for a living. I still kind of believe that, I guess. Shh, don't tell the state of California. But yeah, I mean, it looked like fun, and honestly, it's probably why I did it. I guess I tend to think it's actually not a terrible reason to do things, but your parents might think otherwise. But definitely, if you're gonna, it is really true from the retrospective perspective of adulthood. I kind of think like, well, before doing something for 5 to 7 years, you really want to know the answer, like, why am I doing this? You could be like, I really want to teach. I really want to be a university professor, or I really want to make foundational contributions to I don't know, to mathematical physics or something. I really want to understand computer vision. That's a good reason to go get a PhD or go to graduate school. That's for a PhD, it's a really hard question. For a master's degree, it's less hard. It's a less hard question because it's only 2 to 3 years only, but it's still 2 to 3 years of your life. So it's better to know the answer than not to know the answer. So really the hardest part of grad school, and something those of you who are in graduate programs will have know that you will have asked yourself at some point, like, oh, why am I doing this? So it's a good idea to have an idea to answer that question, is to have an idea like, why am I doing this? Because if you have an idea why you're doing this, that really helps the motivation in those times, because there's always going to be a time when it's hard to do it. So that's the hard part of going to grad school. So that's the hard part. So the surprising thing is the easy part. So the easy part, believe it or not, is actually paying for it, because if you're going to, especially for a PhD, so if you go get a PhD to go in the mathematical sciences, in math, CS, science, engineering, data science, statistics, any of that, is that it should be free. And roughly speaking, any place you want to go to get a PhD, it basically, if they don't give you a free ride when they admit you, they're not really admitting you. And unless you really have some driving reason to go there, you probably shouldn't go. I mean, that's not true of other subjects. If you're interested in French literature, okay, well then this wouldn't be true. Getting a PhD in French literature is not free. Like you have to incur like huge amounts of loans. But in STEM, especially in math is the tradition. PhD grad school is free, and you might have to do some teaching to sort of earn it, but they will pay you something resembling a living wage to go to school. I mean, especially in a sort of a relatively well-off program, there's a very strange thing where you should, hopefully, with luck, you will be able to at least get a year or two where you're getting paid something like a living wage just to do your homework, which is define living wage. Oh my gosh, it's enough to afford an apartment in Davis. So what's a realistic comparison? It's enough to afford an apartment in Davis if you cook for yourself. Actually, this is something I'd recommend if you're going to grad school at any level, PhD or master's degree. I recommend that you learn how to cook because they're not going to give you a huge amount of money. They're not going to but they should cover rent, and it will cover food if you cook for yourself. I think that's always been roughly the calculation. At least I think from what I remember, that's roughly the calculation that happens at one of these fancy research universities, that they say, well, we're give them enough, or give the students enough to so they won't be like taking some other job in order to put food on the table. But again, as long as you cook for yourself, you're not going to be able to go out to eat every day. It's not so hot. It's not like a lawyer's salary where you can like go out to eat every night. But definitely, if you cook for yourself, that's usually something. That's what I mean by close to living wage. Felix, did I answer your question? Yeah, you know, it's not a lot of people are going to be able to send money home after they're done, but most people should be able to eat as long. Well, if you take roommates and or maybe live in some sort of subsidized housing. So a lot of these places are pretty good at offering some kind of subsidized housing. You should be okay. All right. So any questions about the hard part or the easy part? And I think it's often a surprise to people. The easy part, I think, is very often, if you're not familiar with this fact, it's very often a surprise. Oh yeah, especially if you get a master's degree here. Well, you might say like, well, what if I get a master's degree here? So if you get a master's degree here, it's not as easy, right? Like I said, the hard part in a master's degree is not as hard as the hard part is in a PhD. But the easy part in a master's degree is not as easy as it is in a doctoral degree. But because we don't support everybody, but if you're willing to be a TA, if you're willing to teach some classes, then you can pay for much of your tuition expense. So one thing, if you sort of get a kind of a minimum class load, which is not that bad actually, it's not zero, but it's sort of not it's not a crushing load of classes, things to teach. You can actually get your tuition waived. So for those of you, those of you who are just looking to finish up in the master's degree program here, there's something that you should wake up for. Hello, and pay attention to, because if you're willing to teach, that gives and you sort of teach enough, which is basically 3 workshops or sort of one class of your own and a workshop. Then we can arrange for you to get a tuition waiver. And so it's a big deal, my friends. This really sort of makes a big difference. And actually, it's been really great for our program since we started arranging for that tuition waiver or fee waiver. It's not that's probably not a living wage, I think. But on the other hand, it does seem that there are a lot of people who seem to be able to pay, like basically somehow are able to get by on those teaching that teaching money. So it's maybe not that far off, I guess. So go apply to be. You have my email. If you want to be a TA, if you hear this and say, "Oh my God, why did I not want to be a TA?" Let me know, and I'll arrange for you to apply. So TA could be either a workshop instructor or more likely, probably, or also a teaching your own section of college algebra is usually what happens. But yeah, so you have to be sort of, basically to be an official TA, you need to get some sort of extra training, and there's like a week of extra training, and sort of there's an audition to pass, and there's like a week of extra training. But once you do that, then you're accepted as a full TA, and then you get a tuition waiver. It's more work than sort of just being a workshop instructor, because there's a sort of another classification where you're a workshop instructor, but not a TA per se. Oh yeah, so do they pay you and also give you a tuition waiver? They also pay you. Right, and I was gonna say, like, we're all. I don't think anybody here is actually a full. Actually, it fits this technical classification. So I think. So I mean, it is more work, as you can see, because just because you can see the way you can see that is because those folks are off teaching instead of hanging out here, and then they're probably watching you're probably watching this on YouTube. Hey TAs, but yes, they also pay you, and it with roommates and help. With roommates, I think it's enough to cover rent. Is my impression. Yeah, with roommates, and you got to cook for. Again, did I mention you got to cook for yourself? It's so helpful to learn to cook before you go to grad school. I think people are generally able to cover their rent, to scrape by. It's not a glamorous lifestyle, but you can kind of get by. Shana, did I answer your question? All right. So, if you go here for a master's degree, I encourage all of you to apply to be official TAs. Okay. So, great. So the next item, on the agenda is to talk about qualifications. So how do people figure? Oh, there's one more thing on the chat. So TAs, official TAs must be in the master's program. That's correct. Undergraduates can't be qualified to be TAs. Oh, hi, Jachi. All right. Yes. But let me make sure I answer this clearly. So Jachi asked, TAs must have master's degrees. Well, you don't have to have a master's degree already, but you need to be in the master's program. You need to be a graduate student. Undergraduates cannot qualify for the tuition waiver. Jachi, does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay. So right. So now. So what I'm going to do is, so the next thing is talking about sort of how do people decide how you get into graduate school? And this is, I think this is often kind of a surprise to people. So especially in the doctoral level. And oh yes, and right, and this is where we start to see some changes, especially because of quarantine and the pandemic. Okay, so there's sort of three stages. There are things that are necessary to get in. There are things that are sufficient to get in. They're things that will make sure your application does not go in the trash. That's very important. That somebody will actually read your application. Once somebody actually reads your application, because there are a bazillion applications and not that many people. So the honest truth of it is that every system, every doctoral program, and probably even to some extent, I think to some extent, even us here at San Jose State, you need some sort of criterion that will that will determine, like, let us cut down the number of applications that, to be honest, that we actually read. And then there's some things that are nice. Those might sort of resolve borderline cases. But yeah, that's the way to think about it. Things that are necessary, things that are sufficient, and things that might help, though they probably won't be the most important factors. So to make sure that somebody actually reads your doctoral application, you need straight A's. From San Jose State, more or less, you need straight A's. I mean, that's not quite true. I can think of certainly of several folks who's maybe even got sort of D's and F's at the beginning of their career, and then sort of life-changing event happened, or sort of gradually happened, and then got A's for the last few years. And so that is actually possible. You can sort of, if you have this sort of narrative, like, well, I started off by, I was working at I was working at Rubio's 40 hours a week, and I was also making coffee for 20 hours a week, and so no wonder I didn't do so great in school. But then I kind of had a life-changing event, and then I quit my coffee job while still working at Rubio's, and then started to get straight A's. And then if you have some narrative like that, then you can that explains, like, why you didn't get A's sort of from the beginning. Then that's what necessary. Then that sort of qualifies as straight A's. That's the more or less part. So that's for a doctoral program coming from here. For the master's program, we like to have A's and B's, something at least A's and B's. That's good. So you need good grades, or really good grades, and you need to have challenging coursework. So those good grades should be in hard classes. And now this one, I think, and this is actually this is one I'm sort of not actually quite sure, and I think the most, I thought about correcting the slide, but I thought it'd be more dramatic to put the big X on it. That's very dramatic, isn't it? So one of the things we'll talk about is that usually a big part of this presentation is having to take the math subject GRE, which is kind of a fearsome, a rightfully feared test. It's pretty hard, man. I've taken it as like, oh, this is hard. And like other professors are like, whoa, that's pretty challenging, man. But here's the thing. So this year, so no subject GRE, math subject GREs are being given until at least April 2021, and so which is after the admissions deadline for basically every graduate program. Maybe not ours, But it's certainly that's certainly, well, maybe not ours, but okay, for not every graduate program, but every doctoral program, all those deadlines are in December and January, maybe a couple in February. So there's basically, if you haven't already taken the subject GRE, then there's no way you're going to be able to take it now until April 2021. So I would imagine, so there are two things that might happen. And actually, let me sort of group those over here. And I think the honest truth is, not only do I not know how people will change their policies to match this, but it might be that they don't know, because I actually just heard that the University of California lost a lawsuit so it could be GRE subject is optional. So one possibility is that places will make the GRE subject optional, like, you know, either if you submit one, they'll consider in your application, but if you don't, then they won't. But the lawsuit that the UC just lost said that the UC was trying to defend the position that it's okay to have the subject optional, and basically the lawsuit ended up is that was discriminatory. I think discriminatory against people who are not able to take the GRE subject, and so my guess, but this is really pretty much a complete guess. But my guess would be that what will happen in terms of doctoral admissions policies is basically, at least in California, no one will be allowed to consider the GRE subject at all. I mean, you'll have to call. I mean, you'll have to email each school and sort of figure out what's going on there. But basically, I think my guess is that it's certainly true that no one will be able to require the math subject GRE, so you don't have to take it. And for sure, I mean, well, that's good. It's just good because you won't be able to until after this admission cycle. But I think my guess is that actually this is a year when people will not be able to consider it at all because of that, actually kind of because of that lawsuit. And so I don't know. Oops. And again, my honest answer is that I don't know what will replace that. So I don't. It could be bad, right? It could be that, well, they have to figure out some way to cut down the number of applications they actually read. And so, what's one way to do that? Well, one way to do that is to not accept, is just throw out the applications from not famous places. And I'm very proud of being from San Jose State, but on the grand scale of things, we're not that famous in many ways in this particular sphere of activity. And so they might just throw out. All the applications from the working class schools. I'll be honest with you. So that's one possibility. I hope that doesn't happen. You might get a reaction on the other end, which is that some places will probably say, like, well, this is the year we're actually going to be fair and really read all the applications and try to make a fair assessment based on stuff other than this test, which I have to say I find amusing. I didn't do that great on it, actually, back in the day, and now I sort of find it amusing because it's an interesting test. But it's not super fair. It's just a sort of different dartboard for randomly cutting down the number of applications that you read. I mean, honestly, that's probably the most accurate description of it. And so some places might actually decide to be fair and try to figure out some fair way of reading the applications without the subject GRE. And so it's just going to be a lot more work for them. But anyway, right? So the rest of it still stands this year. And I guess I wanted to leave this in because if you're applying next year, oh gosh, if you're applying in fall 21 to start in a doctoral program in fall 2022, that seems so far away, and it is, I guess. Then by then we may have a vaccine. I hope we'll have a vaccine. And so then the math subject GRE comes back into play, and then you have to go do it. Anyway, so you need good grades or excellent grades in challenging coursework, and you need you should have something. I guess these days you should really have something beyond regular classroom work, especially research experience or a thesis. A thesis is if you happen to be a master's program, this is one of your advantages over having just a bachelor's degree. thesis work will especially if your thesis work is original, that will indicate some sort of qualification beyond regular classroom work. So these are the things that you need. These are things that you pretty much need in order to get people to read your application. That's not even the surprising part. So does this all make sense so far? That one slide had a lot of information. So everybody okay so far? Yeah, that was a lot on one page. And I think for the master's degree, I think pretty much A's and B's and challenging coursework is what you need to get us to read your application. I don't think we don't require. I'm pretty sure we don't really, at least don't really require something beyond regular classroom work. I mean, but though it is always nice. Okay, so that's what you need. Those are things that are necessary to get in. Here's what's sufficient. So now, suppose you have those things, and now someone's actually reading your application. The thing that will get you, at least I know at a Research One university or a doctoral program, what will actually get you into the program is letters of recommendation. And so because sort of what people tend to really trust, so on the good side, maybe on the plus side here, what they tend to really trust is letters of recommendation from professors, like, because people have different grading scales, and different places have more grade inflation than others. We have very little grade inflation, I would say, and say Stanford up the road has a lot of grade inflation. It's a good place, but the grades are inflated. But the letters tend to sort of even that all out, and because especially if your letter writers know to write a good letter. So because what do you want in a good letter? A letter that's good for you, it should be something that you will not be able to read, right? So a good letter is probably one that you will not be able to read, because what a good letter will do is it will rank you in comparison. I mean, this is tough, but it's true. I mean, an effective letter that actually provides information will rank you compared to other people that the letter writer has known, who have gone to grad school, or maybe that they know in grad school, or they or colleagues of theirs. So what you want is that the sort of thing you want is this person the best student they've seen in 5 years or 10 years or 15 years? Those are good. That's you really want. But I think something that everyone can aspire to is that here's a person that we just sent to your program and just finished. This person has just as much potential and is just as likely to finish as that person was. So if you can say that if you can get a letter that says you are as good or better than X, and X just finished up at the school that you want to go to, well, then that's good, right? That's sort of like, that's a direct and fair comparison, and it gives a good idea of what you're capable of. And so that is the letter you want, right? And unquestionably, that you want a letter like that. And so for obvious reasons, you don't want to hurt X's feelings, or maybe there's some other sentence in your letters like, well, this person's not quite as good as Y, but definitely better than X. So you don't want to sit there and watch yourself be compared to X and Y. No, I mean, and you can't do that without and you can't do that in a non-confidential letter. So when you apply, there's like a box to check that says, like, do you waive your right to see these letters? And I strongly advise that you check that box, because that is the only way that one of these informational letters will go through, is if you check that box. All right, so that was a really important point. So does everybody so to get into some place, I think this is probably even true for our master's program, but if to some lesser extent. So the way you get in is by letters of recommendation, and so you should check the box that says you're not going to read the letters. So everyone ready to waive your right to read the letters? I mean, you don't have to, but yeah, I know but it really helps, because a letter that goes through you, unfortunately, because of what the letter is supposed to do, Yes, the writer sees that. That's very important. And a letter that goes through you is not worth very much. I mean, for better or worse, I mean, the letters that go through you tend to be sort of more anodyne. There's like, well, this person took this from me and got this grade, and they're a fine and capable person. I mean, you just don't want to. It's just. I mean, well, I might still be willing to write an honest letter, but yes. Yes, thank you for being honest, Felix. So I might be willing to write you an honest letter, but other people might not. Is the honest truth, and they would just feel They just feel it's just very uncomfortable to say that this person that I'm writing is better than X and Y, not as good as Z and W. So that's a tough thing to sort of that's what the letter should say. And so if you want the letter to say that, you're probably going to have to waive your right. So yeah. It's true. It is a gamble, but there it is. Yeah, I mean, so I think if the big effect of the pandemic and quarantine this year is not going to be I don't know if it's going to make it more likely that you're going to get in places. It could make it less likely. I honestly don't know. I think the most likely thing to happen is just it's going to be way more random. Like any admission or selection process is always going to be random, just because of human nature. But this year is going to be really much more random than usual. So yeah, yes, it's a huge gamble, especially post-COVID. That's right, Felix. Yes, it's well, okay. So yes, Felix says it's going to be harder to develop the prof-student relationship during this online schooling period. Well, to be honest, I mean, it was definitely going to affect learning. Right, like if you sort of don't get to know your prof, then it's going to make it less fun to take your classes. But on the other hand, does that matter for the letter so much? Well, I mean, if you don't develop the relationship, you crush every exam and like turn in perfect homework every time. It doesn't really. It honestly does. The thing like human considerations, I'm afraid, don't matter that much when you're trying to get into grad school. I gotta be honest here. I remember, when I was applying to grad school, I remember I loved abstract algebra when I took it. Like, oh, this is my favorite class. This is like my favorite thing I've ever done in school. And so I went to the professor and I said, well, professor, can you write me a letter for a recommendation for grad school? And he says, oh, sure. What's your name? So he had no idea who I was. So well, that was a little bit of a bummer. Like, oh, he has no idea who I was. Like, well, I'm Tim Shu, and he said, oh, and he looked at his grades. He's like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll write you a letter. So honestly, it doesn't matter that it's nice if they think you're sort of a decent person. They have some personal relationship with you, but it doesn't matter that much on the other end, unfortunately. For better or worse, it doesn't really matter that much on the other end. Because all that the content of the letters is ranking you in comparison to other people, and so and that you can do that. You can, even if you don't. It's great to have this professor-student relationship. Learning does not happen without it, but you won't need it for the letter. Is the honest truth. Yeah. So I mean, unless you're like a terrible person. I mean, I guess if you're a terrible person to the professor, then they might say like, oh, this person's terrible, I'm not gonna write the letter. But other than that, so beyond that very low bar, personal stuff doesn't matter that much. Yeah, sorry. So a good test that you want to do that to figure out. So when you get these letters, so you should start getting asking me these letters now, because we are very irresponsible people, professors, and we're likely not to get things done, especially these days, because the world's on fire and whatnot. Pick your three or four people who know you academically, not necessarily personally. Like if there's someone who knows you personally, but you've never had them, they've never had you in a class, that's not going to be a useful letter. So I mean, I get people ask me for that letters like that occasionally. Like, well, gee, Dr. Shu, you seem like a nice guy, and a little bit down, but they seem like a nice guy, and we've gotten along. And can you write me a letter? Like, well, I've never had it in class, so it's not going to be. No one's going to read my letter. What you should really do is you should want to think like, which challenging classes did I get A's? basically. Did I get it like a really good grade? And then that's how you should and then you ask those professors, can you write me a letter? And you shouldn't worry too hard about pushing them, because it's their job. That is their job to write those letters for you. And so they kind of have to respond to you. But when you do that, so you just ask, like, say I'm interested in getting a master's degree, or I'm interested in going to a doctoral program. Where do you think I should apply? And can you give me 3 or 4 suggestions? And if there are 3 or 4 suggestions sound like places that you want to go, great. Then they're going to write you a letter that they should, if they know what they're doing. And I think our faculty all do. If they know what they're doing, that their letters will get you into those schools, and they'll write letters that will get you into those schools, or at least they would in normal years. And if they say, if they say something, if they sent something really high, you're like, wow, that's great. I didn't really, maybe you never know. Maybe you have potential that you didn't realize. But if they sort of if they sort of suggest something way down on the list from where you want to go, or perhaps they say something like, well, grad school's not for everybody, then you don't want a letter from that person. I mean, you shouldn't necessarily conclude that grad school is not for everybody. That just means, like, you don't want that person's letter. So this is probably, I think, this is probably the most important slide of the whole thing. So I'm glad I'm glad we still have 20 minutes left. So are there any questions on this slide? This is the money slide here. Yeah, so really do well in classes enough to impress a professor and 3 to 4 professors. Okay, so there are other things that are useful. So if you happen to have, but not necessary, if you happen to have a published paper, that's helpful. These are all things that if you're applying right now, it's maybe sort of too late to do them. But if this is sort of more, if you're applying for next year, these are all things that you can do. Let's see. It's helpful to have research, if you're an undergraduate, it's helpful to have research experience for undergraduate. So there's a list here at NSF. Let me click on this. So I will send these slides around. And here's a list on an external website. And here it is. So it's basically summer math camp, and you go to summer math camp and you learn some math and then write a paper. So this is great stuff. I have to say, there seem to be fewer of these than usual. I don't know if it's because there's a lack of funding or people just aren't doing them because, yeah, so there's a list, there's 36 of them, and they're usually more. So I'm not sure what to make of that. That could be a quarantine thing. It could be it could reflect the budgetary priorities of the current government. I don't know. But for what it's worth, there are sort of fewer than usual. Right, so experience as a TA, facilitator, or tutor. That, again, that's alas, it's one of those things that doesn't help you get in. They figure out whether you can get into a place based on how you can sort of do how you can sort of essentially do research, and then if you happen to be able to teach, okay, that's a secondary consideration. And there's sort of basically 2 kinds of essays that you write. One is a sort of a research statement, and the other is like a personal statement. And we'll talk about those briefly. And so there are different essay requirements for different places, but all essays are some kind of linear combination of research statement and personal statement. Oh yeah, so will those math camps become virtual? I think, well, we'll see. I mean, it's not that's probably why there's so few of those camps, because those are probably the ones that have some plan to go virtual, which is quite difficult, actually. I visited one over the summer, and there's like a huge amount of effort you can do it, but it's really difficult. It's not quite as good, I guess. So if we're still on quarantine by the summer, yes, probably those. Then probably those will be the camps, and the only camps those will be virtual. But there is always a chance that we'll have it's a kind of an outside shot, but it's not unreasonable to think that there will be a distributed vaccine and sort of some level of general immunity by summer 2021. it's hard to imagine now, right? But it is possible. So that's like scientifically not out of the question. And so maybe they will happen. But I don't know. We'll see. Like you said, everything's up in the air now. Anyway, so let me actually try to get to yeah. So 17 minutes. Let me get to the 2 essays that you have to write. So the research statement is very straightforward. Like the ideal research statement would go something. I mean, okay, this is an exaggeration, but an ideal research statement would be something like, my goal in getting a PhD in math is to prove the Riemann hypothesis, and I have the following method for doing so. So like, there's nothing about yourself, right? Like who really cares if you're a person? Maybe you're just some sort of robot on 2 legs. No offense to our robot community. But if you can prove the Riemann hypothesis, fantastic. They're gonna let you into. If you have a good idea how to prove the Riemann hypothesis, they're gonna let you into grad school. Great. So this is just very sort of clinical, and it just sort of and it's hard. I mean, both of these sorts of statements, the research statement and the personal statement, it's hard to make stuff up, and because the stuff you make up is really not nearly as convincing. And I have to say, like when I say this thing about statements, like my own statements that I used to get in grad school, they were pretty bad actually. I just sort of made stuff up, and in retrospect, like what was I thinking? My God, I didn't know what I was doing. But anyway, yeah. So the research statement is just like, here's what I'm interested in working on. I have interested in the following kinds of problems. If a really good statement would be something like, I have the following ideas on how to solve these problems, and so that would be great. But so the research statement just sort of, you can talk about what things you have done. I have done research in the following things. Here's what I did on this paper. It's pretty cut and dried. That's what a research statement is. Yeah. So if you, like I said, if you happen to have some previous research experience, which would be great. You talk about like, what did the project achieve? What did you yourself do? Which is something that often people letters from other people don't address necessarily. How independent were you? How awesome were your results? Like, did this catch the attention of NASA or something? Oh yeah, and I guess and at San Jose State, the one sort of big advantage that we have is that we have this program called CAMCOS. This is the place to discuss 2 S's, CAMCOS. Math 203. So if you've taken this class, Math 203, it's a class where students where you form student research teams to do work on a real life problem, and it's by application only. And as you may have seen, you should have received a solicitation to apply for this program. Apply! It's really a fantastic program. I'm not saying that just because I used to run it. It's really an awesome program, and you should go do it. And whether this is, I mean, and it'll definitely be a plus for you in going to grad school if you go to grad school. But it's just a really excellent experience no matter what. So yeah, so this would also be where you would discuss things like CAMCOS, which is probably our sort of most our best route into doing research, especially if you're an undergraduate. Either that or do a master's thesis with somebody. So yeah, so that's the research. Any questions about the research statement? Oh, so in Math 203, you can make up any no, you don't make. Well, actually, the great thing about it is that you don't make up projects. What happens is somebody from industry comes in and essentially hires San Jose State to do a project. So the thing about the research is not sort of something that you make up for the most part. You make up the research, but the problem is you don't make up the problem. The problems come from real life, which is the really cool thing about it. And I think right now we have a CAMCOS project running, which is about cryptocurrency. It's about working on the sort of cryptography involved in doing things like a Bitcoin, except it's not Bitcoin; it's actually Ethereum. If you're familiar with cryptocurrency, yeah, yes, someone interested in pure math should apply, especially this one. This Ethereum project, if you got the email, this is one of the rare ones where it's actually probably better for people in pure math. It sounds like in some ways it's probably better for it to have experience in pure math than in the solving differential equations, because this is not about solving differential equations. It's essentially about something. I mean, it's maybe not literally abstract algebra that you learned in abstract algebra, but it's the way of thinking is pretty close to, it's very much like an abstract algebra way of thinking. So yes, if you're just interested in life, you should apply. And I should say also, if you're interested in statistics, you should also apply, because there will probably be some statistical aspects to it, I think, this semester. But if not this semester, then definitely maybe next semester. We regularly have problems, CAM class projects in statistics, and so and that's a great place, and which is a great source of real life problems. There's it's just a matter of, I mean, there's just like an infinite number of problems out there that it's just a matter of sort of finding them and arranging the contracts. So definitely also, if you're interested in stats, you should apply to this one, but also, and especially if there's one that's specifically a statistics project. I think like the last one we had, most recent one we had, I think was working on a natural language interpreter for Intuit, the tax people, like TurboTax, the people make TurboTax. And so they want a natural language, like a language interpreter to be built into their TurboTax, so that if you ask TurboTax a question, it sends you to the right answer without having to sort of have some knowledge of how the index works. It's the machine learning. Yes, which is statistics. I read this joke on the internet. How's it go? Let's see. If you're trying to get it funded, it's artificial intelligence. When you're hiring people, you call it machine learning, and when you do it, it's statistics. All that stuff is. Well, okay. I'm sure somebody in the AI business would disagree with me. It's just statistics. It's just curve fitting, more or less. All right. So that's the research statement. Oops. Because of time, let me try to get onto the personal statement. So here is where you, since you now have been thinking about what is my answer to the question, why do I want to go to grad school? Your personal statement answers exactly that question. So why do you want to go here, and how can you demonstrate that you have the perseverance to stick through it through 5 to 7 years? And so basically, what you want to do, if you and this is one of the other areas where San Jose State has an advantage, even though you might not think of it. People at San Jose State generally have much more interesting life stories than people I've met at sort of, well, I don't know, at institutions where your tuition has another digit in it. It's a 5-digit tuition as opposed to 4-digit. So so this if you have an interesting story, like where you worked construction in the day and UPS at night, where you grew up, where your country was being bombed, and the basic point would be like you can show that you can recover after life hits you in the mouth, because let's be honest. I mean, and those of you in the master's program will know, life, the master's program, graduate school hits you in the mouth every now and then, maybe even a lot, and that happens to everybody. I got hit in the mouth pretty regularly, metaphorically speaking, when I was in grad school. And the question is, are you going to get up after you get hit in the mouth? And if you can show that you've gotten up after getting hit in the mouth in other parts of life, then graduate school, then that is actually a pretty positive correlation with getting through graduate school. Right. So if you happen to belong to an underrepresented group, this is a good place to mention that you're proud to represent that community, or even better, that you have a plan to help underrepresented groups. If this one is one of your goals, this is the place to let people know. Oh yeah, and it's also true that so one thing about being from a place where people have interesting life stories is that you may have a strange hole or gap in your resume, and this would be the place to explain it. Like what happened to these 2 years here, and this is an actual story from a friend of mine. She actually got interested in math while she was in prison. While she was in prison, she decided because she was there she got arrested in an anti-nuclear protest and got sentenced to a couple of years in the federal pen, and then became interested in math. So she said, I'm going to be a lawyer so that people don't end up in the same situation that I did. And then she took a math class, and that was that. Anyway, so if you have an unusual part of your resume, this is a good place to explain it. Right, and like as I've been alluding to, I don't want to go through this too much because we only have a few minutes left. But you at San Jose State will generally have more to write about the average grad school applicant. Okay, so again, but the big thing is take hard classes, get A's or get A's and B's at least if you want to get into our master's programs, and impress 3 to 4 professors who are going to write you good letters. So so that and I think I'll skip the next part. So so I want to go to the application calendar because we're running short on time. So there are questions about what gets you in. Yes, coding projects are helpful. I think yes. What do you call it when you build a GitHub portfolio, or what do you call it when you build a little site for yourself on GitHub?
I think it is a GitHub portfolio. This is just me thinking.
Yes. Yeah, Mungru was asking what kind of classes are hard. Oh yeah, graduate classes are hard. So you're in the master's program, so all your classes are hard. Well, I mean, the ones. They're the ones that take twice as long as the other classes. So in the pure math program, it's going to be like 128 A and B, 131 A and B, those classes. Let's see. I mean, every program has its own hard classes. I guess in statistics, the sort of brutal class is 163. Is that right? Those of you in stats, math 163 is the toughie. You're an actuarial student. Will your future actuarial exams count for graduate school application? I don't know. I honestly don't know. Probably not directly, but the things that you have to learn to do well in the actuarial exams will count. So it's definitely worth preparing for them, if only that to the extent that preparing well for the actuarial exams, especially the probability stuff, prepares you well for, and probability and statistics stuff that prepares you well for grad school. But I don't think there's a direct relationship. I mean, the future, what the actuarial exams really prepare you well for is being an actuary. And if you sort of like, well, if you happen to be fond of making like a pretty good chunk of money for maybe only working 9 to 5, like a sort of reasonable human being, then it's not so bad to be an actuary, my friend. That's good stuff. But yeah, for grad school, maybe not directly. But I would say it's good at least indirectly. Anyway, yeah. So hard classes, get A's or A's and B's, and impress some professors. Doesn't mean you have to get to know them. Don't go wash their car, babysit their kids. Don't do stuff like that. Make sure that they're aware of your academic work, and that they try to figure out if they think of it highly. I mean, I guess giving an A is usually an indication of people. Getting a good grade is usually an indication of people thinking highly. Do internships help? Maybe in an applied program, not in a pure program. I doubt that would help. I mean, unless your internship was like, I don't know, proving the Riemann hypothesis. Yeah, so a lot of these things that are helpful, some of these things that are helpful in business, like to getting a job, like internships, might not be helpful in getting to grad school. It might be, I don't know, but that's not obviously helpful to me, because it's just a different path of what you want. I mean, the internships basically are some testimony to your ability to navigate the real world. And I don't know, grad school, there's not a whole lot of contact with the real world. I mean, that's not completely true, but there's those of you in our master's program will, I think agree that's not entirely wrong. That's a little bit removed from the real world. I mean, teaching is probably the sphere in which you're most likely to get to have contact with the real world. Any other questions about how to get in? Okay, I think we just have a couple minutes left in our official time. So get research experience. I'm gonna skip this. Let's see. I'm gonna skip this too. All right. So here is the fall. If you're applying in this is sort of the calendar roughly for applying to start 1 year from now in fall 2021. And so let's see. So this is I want to leave this here. Like I said, oh, I don't want to do that. I want to do this. There we go. So the math subject. So I think you probably still have to take. Actually, Gabriella, you're up on this. You still have to take the regular GREs, right? Because that's still open.
Yes, so depending on where you are, some physical locations will still be open. Otherwise, they have a virtual option.
Oh, yeah, you take the spyware version,
yeah.
right?
Yes.
Yes. So you can either take it physically, and it turns out that San Jose is one of the testing centers that is still open. I looked that up this morning. So yeah, you still have to take the regular GREs, which are just like the SATs, except the math part is not as hard, if I remember correctly. I think that's still true. In any case, you just have to. It won't really affect your. I mean, I guess if you don't do so well, it's a little embarrassing, and maybe like you were like totally strung out the day you took it, and then it didn't go so well. But the English is harder. The English is super hard in the general G. Yes, that's true. It's weird. So you have like this for the math and English SATs, and then the math gets easier and the English gets harder. Or maybe I should say I spent 4 years thinking about math, so it seemed easier. But the English, that's right. That's true. The English is hard. There's like lots of fancy language. But you're in math, so it probably doesn't matter that much. I'll be honest with you. I mean, it matters. You should try not to embarrass yourself, but you should study. Get the book and go through the prep and whatever. Okay. So, yeah. So bombing the English part won't. No, it might affect you a little. Yeah, but no, not really. Yes, there are plenty. I met plenty of people in. I know plenty of mathematicians who would bomb the English part. Yeah, we are, for example, not so well known for writing well, as you may have seen in your textbooks. So there we go. All right. So yeah. So August, September. Like now, you want to sign up for the GREs. You take them in October, November. You want to think about. I would think about writing your essay now. And so show it to somebody and get feedback. Because if you sort of write it is possible saying that if you write an essay about how awesome you are. So here's a weird. So one common essay, which I've seen a number of people write, like I am really awesome at math, and it's not like the profession discourages bragging, to be honest. But the problem with writing an essay that says like I'm really awesome at math is that somebody's going to react like, well, of course you're really supposed to be really awesome at math. Everybody here is really awesome at math. Like, why are you bothering me? It sort of leads you to suspect that maybe this person is not that awesome at math. You want to at least not hurt yourself in the essay. And even though, like I said, it's not going to make a huge amount of difference, but you can sort of hurt yourself actually with the essay. But make sure somebody reads it. And what you want to do is you want to think that you're kind of dealing with people who are extremely irresponsible people. So what you should do is you should prepare a packet for the people writing you letters, saying like, oh my God, my favorite person who ever did this, like made me a spreadsheet. And she said like, it's like, I need to write a letter for this school. It's due on this date. It has this parts in it. And, and she just sort of laid it all out for me like I was a child. And I really appreciate it because I don't know if you can tell, but I am kind of a child, basically, like a child in a middle-aged man's body. And that was really helpful. So, so please do that for your letter writers, and they'll really appreciate that if you sort of say, now this is when you need to write letter number 5 because this is the early one. And they're like, okay, I'll do it. All right. So seriously, do as much, if you're an organized person, do as much organization as you can for them. Because that's really helpful. It certainly gave me a warm feeling when I wrote that person's letters. Fill out the applications. Oh, I should mention the applications are, I think, are they still $50 or $100 each? That sound about right to everybody? Or maybe you don't know yet. I believe the applications are closer to 100 now. Yeah, okay, there we go. So the standard price is now 100, that's a drag. But you should be aware that with financial hardship, you should be able to apply for a fee waiver, and or at least a lot of places you should be able to. And you'll want to look up some way of waiving that fee, because I know that $100 per school, if you're applying to a number of schools, that's not a small amount of money. And so there's one thing that most people won't do without prodding that I really recommend for everybody. Everybody should apply to the NSF Graduate Research Fellowship, and so I'll send everybody this. Yeah, I see. Sometimes people have a waiver for being part of specific organizations. Each school has their own list. Okay, that's a good point. Yeah, so each school will have, go look at those lists and maybe you should join those organizations, I guess. So the NSF Graduate Research Fellowship is the sort of fancy national free ride. And I guess the story is, if you are a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident, then you need that in order to get the NSF fellowship. You have to be either a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident. If you qualify, if you haven't qualified, that you should apply for this. And the reason is, even if you don't get it, I mean, it's hard to get. I'm not going to lie. Even if you don't get it, what it forces you to do is forces you to get all your stuff in order by October. And so then once you do that, you can show it to the people, your letter writers. You say, like, look at all these things, look how organized I am, look at this statement, this case I've made for myself. And your letter writers will be like, oh, yes, well, that's true that this person actually did do all these things. And so, yeah, I'll write you a nice letter. Yay. But everybody should apply for that. And then that's sort of my motivation for the profession, is that the amount of money that's sort of sent to that is allocated to the things like the Graduate Research Fellowship is partly a function of how many people apply for it. Because if nobody applies for it, then people are like, well, no one really wanted this, so we don't need this program anymore. So, but if like a bazillion people apply for the NSF Graduate Research Fellowship, then more money will come to the program, and then eventually, in the long run, there may eventually be more graduate research fellowships. Anyway, so this is a good deadline to try to meet. You want to try to get your applications done essentially by mid-October. If you can do that, that's really good. It's at least a goal to shoot for. And then let's see, there's the general exam, there's a testing center in San Jose, that's true. Oh yes, and the math subject exam, again, not this year. That would normally be a big thing. It is really hard, but since it's not happening this year, I'll just leave it on this slide. So now I think, you know what, we are like 5 minutes over. So what I want to do is, I'm just going to flip through this. You can see, you can look at this. You can look at this and click on this link here. This will give you a report on new doctoral recipients if you haven't got a PhD. That'll just show you sort of what the job market is like right now. The unfortunate fact that I always find, but this is unfortunate but true, roughly speaking, the economy, when you finish your PhD, there's it's sort of a time lag from because whatever the economy is doing now, it takes a couple of years for the taxes that, for example, that we're not collecting now, make a dent in the university budgets. And so a rough rule of thumb is that the job market for PhDs, when you finish your PhD, will be like what the general job market is right now. So not great, but there it is. Yeah, sorry. I wish I had better news for you there, but that's rough. But that we, Felix, can you? You said what? So the job market right now, in general, is not great, right? And so my rough experience is that if you like right now apply for a PhD, go in to get a PhD program, and then go do that for 5 years, the job market for you when you come out as a PhD will be kind of like the job market is for everybody else right now, because what happens is those for PhD for jobs requiring PhDs, those effects are kind of pushed down the line. By the way, because they're often kind of driven by government budgets. Essentially, the academia is a more or less entirely government-funded program. I mean, not entirely, but yeah, more or less. So those positions are all kind of dependent on government funding, and government funding effects take a couple of years to work through the system. Yeah, so if you're going to apply, so it might be if you applied for a PhD now, and you went into industry at the end of your PhD, that might be a different story. But on the other hand, you'll like everybody else that came in with you will also be applying for industry because the university jobs won't be so great. So it may be a somewhat different story, but not entirely. And when I say bad job market, it's not like I knew people. It's not like I don't know anybody. I mean, so barring personal problem, outside of personal problems, which people, that happens to people. I don't know anybody who finished a PhD and then starved to death, or you're even sort of the classic story where you had to go drive a cab or something. Not that there's anything wrong with driving a cab, but we really had to do something else. It's almost always, you know, I mean, I know, I think when I happened to finish my PhD, it was 1994, 1995. It took me a couple years, like it took me 2 tries actually to get out. We were all saying, oh, this is such a miserable job market. Why? My friend Janet had to go get a job on Wall Street where she made $200,000 a year, like in 1994. And so, and that was terrible. She couldn't get an academic. Well, okay, it wasn't so terrible because she was making $200,000 a year. You know, it's okay. But you know, it is maybe not so easy to get certain kinds of jobs. It will probably be not so easy to get certain kinds of jobs, like academic jobs in the next for about 5 years. In about 5 years from now. Felix, did that answer your question? Yes, it's a different story, but not entirely different. No, my friend wasn't odd. I mean, we said that. We were odd. Yeah. Anyway, so and I think so. Let me finish on this slide here. I think this is a good place to stop. You know, so what does it take to finish? It takes hard work, talent, passion, perseverance, patience, and I really want to emphasize this last one. If I can ever get the pen to work again. There we go. It really, my general impression about the success of our folks who go out and get and succeed in PhD programs afterwards is that it really helps to have support from friends and family. It helps to have something else in your life other than school. Is maybe another way of putting it. Because grad school can really completely dominate your life if you let it. Just like any other sort of all-consuming job. So it seems to me that the people who are most successful generally have some kind of outside support. So you know, if you happen to have some current source of outside support, you know, like a spouse or something, you know, that person is obviously not only very valuable just because you love them or whatever, but because they're also they're also kind of necessary for you to succeed in school. So, you know, make sure you sort of nurture those kinds of connections well, because grad school can be tough on them. So one thing you want to think about where do you apply to school? Like, if you have a person, like, where will my person be happy? It's really a very important thing to think about. Anyway, so if you have more questions, this is where I was supposed to type in for data science. You can Google their address, but you can just look them up. Talk to Doctors Chen and Tortora and ask them about the data science masters. So you have my email address there, and Dr. So is in charge of the master's in pure math. Dr. Brinkman is sort of running the master's in applied math, and Dr. Bremer, I believe, is still sort of in charge of the program in stats. Excuse me. And you know, when I send out these slides, click on these links here: phdcomics.com and legogradstudent.tumblr.com. Those actually give a pretty good idea what life in a doctoral program is like. Oh, for machine learning, yes, it's the same people. Also, machine learning. Drs. Chen and Tortora. I mean, I guess for us, we're really regarding machine learning as a one particular area of data science. Okay, so I've gone way over time. So let me. I'll take a few more questions, and then I'll let you all go. But you know, if you got to go now, please take off, because remember, we are recording this on YouTube, and you can sort of catch the last 10 minutes on YouTube. So any questions? Okay, Matt, you know, I don't know about you, but I'm tired now. So if you have more questions, so if you go to master's and PhD, will it save time? It will not. So if you know you eventually want a PhD, go to the PhD now, because getting a master's will not take that much time off the PhD. It will take off some amount of time, sort of between a little and none at all, to be honest. That's my impression. I mean, it's possible. It depends on how much you absorb from our classes. But in practice, usually it doesn't. And so you shouldn't count on it anyway. It will probably not save much time or money to get a master's first and then a PhD. I mean, that's the thing. The situation when you want to do that is where if you think, well, maybe I'm not sure I can get in, or maybe I don't think I can get in I mean, ask somebody for a letter first. But if they say like, well, maybe you should get a master's first, and because it'll be easier for you to get in, that's when you go to the master's degree. Next question. So in your experience, can students juggle full-time jobs and PhDs? No. Except for there's like one or two programs that are designed exactly for that. So Stanford, for example, has something called the mathematical engineering program. I think at least they did. I'm not sure they still have it. But basically what's going on there is you work for some corporation, let's call it Schmoogle, and Schmoogle has more money than sense. And so they're willing to pay for your PhD for you to go get your PhD full time. So it would take you sort of like maybe a lot longer. Also, maybe it'd take you like, maybe instead of 5 to 7 years, it'd take you like 8 to 10 years. But that is the one case when you have a full-time job and a PhD. Because your PhD is your full-time job, I mean, it's somewhere between it's somewhere between a full-time job and like entering some sort of religious order. Maybe closer to the religious order. But hopefully, like I said, did I mention that this is free? Let me emphasize the free part again. By free, I mean free. So in some sense, that shouldn't be a question you have to ask, because they should be paying you. They should pay you enough to get by. It won't be a huge amount of money, but it should be enough so that you don't have to get some kind of full-time job. I guess sometimes people get summer jobs if it's an interesting experience, but you shouldn't be like working at Target or making lattes over the summer either, because your goal should just be to devote yourself to school. Financially, you're best off devote. I mean, I actually think this is sort of true in all school, but definitely if you're getting a PhD, you should be devoting yourself to school as completely as possible, and the school should sort of make it possible for you to do that if we can. I mean, that's one thing about why our TA program is so great. With the TA program, it's a lot of work being a TA, and it's got its share of anguish and heartbreak, and joy, and all kinds of extreme things going on. But at least it's all useful, right? It's all something that's eventually contributing to your career, as opposed to like making lattes, or I don't know, making copies at some internship. I know the internships are not just making copies, but you hear stuff. So Felix, did that answer that question? So that I don't think you can juggle a full-time job and a PhD unless your full-time job is paying for your PhD, and it's probably not a good idea to do it, because it will probably, it's hard for me to imagine getting to that point without something going wrong, basically. At least in STEM. I mean, again, if you're in French literature, it would be a different story. And so, yes, you might actually have to get a full-time job while you're getting your PhD. I don't know though. I'm not in French literature, but I hear it's a much tougher road. All right. Any other questions? All right, like I said, thank you very much for being here and for contributing all these awesome questions. And we'll have this up on YouTube shortly. And so thank you very much. And see you around, y'all. Good luck.